Yeah. I appreciate the opportunity to close this series with a discussion of energy efficiency. I'd like to just start by telling you what I'm going to say, and then you can go away if you don't want to hear all of the details. First, the bottom line is that energy efficiency has been the most important force in shaping energy supply and demand of anything. That is, its significance in reducing the number of imports, the amount of imports, keeping a manageable level, and its impact on decarbonizing the U.S. economy has been 3 to 5 times larger than the impact of changes in oil, gas, nuclear, solar, wind, geothermal, and hydropower altogether. Okay, that's the first point I'm going to make, and I'll go through that. And then second is that energy efficiency is not what's happening by 1 or 2 companies, but it's something that's broadly happening through the entire economy. You're all part of it. Corporations are part of it. Some of it's government action, some of it's utilities, some of it's the private sector. But it's been essentially a change in the economic culture of the United States. That's what the whole story is, and you can go home now if you don't want to hear the details about that. So let's start. This is what I would like to do today. Cover the context, the reality, some aggregate statistics, the security, environmental impacts, then a sectoral analysis enabling energy efficiency and then going forward. But there's no way I can accomplish all of that. So I'm going to cut it off here because we don't have 3 hours for the seminar. On the website, you can click on the draft of a book. This is going to be this is a short version of a book that will be short book that'll be published probably this summer. That's going through these things, and you can download the PDF and read. It's a short 100 pages right now, so it is available on the Energy Seminar website. So let me start with the policy context for energy efficiency by starting with some terminology, because it's easy to miscommunicate without getting those things. I'm defining energy efficiency as any economically efficient reductions in energy use. And notice that energy efficiency is describing a change in one state from the other. And importantly, this change is going to be reducing energy use, but the benefits exceed the cost of doing it. It's not freezing in the dark. It's having a good life still while you use less energy. There's a physics engineer definition as the reduction in the amount of energy used to accomplish the same work. I'm not using that because it could be different work of equal value. For example, if you decide to telecommute to a meeting and accomplish the same thing, you're doing actually different work than flying there using a lot of energy. I'll call that energy efficiency. It's a little bit different than a physics definition. And then I'll talk about the energy intensity of the economy, energy consumption per constant dollar of gross domestic product. Notice energy intensity is described as system state. The accumulation of all of the energy efficiency changes will change this aggregate statistic, the energy state. And so it's going to be important to remember one's a change and the other's a state. I'm talking about this broader definition. So why energy efficiency? Well, if you think of all the energy policy debates in the United States, there are about 3 systems: the economy, the environment, and national security. I call this the energy policy triangle. I think most of the debates have been talking about trade-offs among these issues. So within that, what's good about energy efficiency? Well, the environment, the cleanest energy is the energy you don't have to use in the first place. Good for the environment. Security, if you use a lot less energy and therefore you reduce the amount of energy we have to import from insecure places, it's good for national security. And for the economy, if these are cost-effective, benefits exceed the cost, that it's good for the economy. But what's the bad about energy efficiency? Well, the bad, something I used to talk a lot about, last seminar I gave here was about this. It's all the things we're not doing. Options that have not been fully utilized, the unpicked fruit, the fruit rotting on the tree. And there really are some real behavioral structure and market failures that have stopped us from getting the ideal amount of energy efficiency. A lot of my colleagues in the audience here are working in how you overcome those barriers. Fixing those barriers is hard. And this, you will not even have time to read this. I'm going to go through quickly, but you can read it in the book. So here's a whole bunch of market failures, institutional barriers, and behavioral issues that collectively there's been a tremendous amount of research showing that we could get more energy efficiency and would still be economically attractive if we could get those. So because of those barriers. But what I want to talk about, the reality is that the real energy efficiency is really all around us. We just have to look around and see what's happened. Some of them are new and improved technologies. And let me get an example. Light bulb. Compact fluorescent light uses 13 watts. The equivalent, it replaces an incandescent that used 60 watts. So this is a factor uses about 22% as much electricity to give the light, but it's not ideal light. But now we have LEDs that take about 11 watts to get about the same amount of lighting. And this is just as good quality light as you can get as an incandescent. Another new technology, sort of that's been perfected, is motion sensing, light sensing switches. So you may at home tell your kids to turn off the lights. When you leave the office, you don't have to do that yourself because they'll turn it off. They'll turn themselves off for you. Just new technology. So what's the bottom line of these? If you look at 1973, and I'm using that because that was the date of the oil crisis, the oil embargo, and we compare light sources in 1973 to what we see now for light bulbs, street lights, industrial, offices, kitchen, track lighting. If you look at the reduction in the watts per lumen for lighting, it ranges from 48% to 87% to get the same quality of lighting. So at the micro level, lighting, we use a lot less energy in order to create lights. Refrigerators. Many of you have seen the graph that starts in 73. I like the graph that starts in 1947 because this is the amount of electricity used per refrigerator of things sold in different years, going up to 1973. And as the blue line is refrigerators getting larger, the red line is the amount of electricity per year used in those refrigerators. It was going upward until the time of the energy crisis in 73. And then there was technological advances funded by the federal government at Oak Ridge National Laboratories and Summit Lawrence Berkeley Labs that changed the compressor systems, changed the insulation systems, and now this is what's happening to energy per refrigerator, while the size is continuing to go up. So we're getting refrigeration using a lot less energy as a result of, this shows different standards coming in, But those standards came in because new technology was invented and integrated into refrigerators, and manufacturers then figured out how to use that technology for more efficient refrigerators, and then the standards kept pushing it faster and faster downward. So refrigeration. Cars and trucks. Before 1973, this goes down to 1923, the miles per gallon average of all vehicles on the road was going down. Cars was going down. All trucks was going down. Light trucks, the most recent data was sort of going up. Then we had the energy crisis. Gasoline prices went up. We passed the corporate average fuel efficiency standards, which I'll call the CAFE standards. And that downward trend turned sharply upward. So all cars now on the road as of 2013 got about 23 miles per gallon as opposed to 12.5 miles per gallon in 1973. If you take the inverse of that, fuel use per mile or per 100 miles, in 1973 to drive 100 miles we used 8 gallons. Now for the new cars, we use 4 gallons to drive that same 100 miles. Energy efficiency, we're getting the same quality of services using less energy. Aircraft fuel efficiency, this is an index going back to 1960. If you go down there, this is engine fuel consumption. Standardized thrust of the engine is down now about 60% of what it was in 1960. Aircraft fuel burn per seat mile is about 28% of what it was. Those are basically technological changes. For example, winglets. That increases the efficiency when it's cruising. The Dreamliner, it has modified the equivalent of winglets as that turned up tip. This is composites, a composite body. This is designed to use 20% less fuel than the more recent planes it's replacing. So again, and why is it that they're doing this? According to my son-in-law, who is high up in Boeing, because the airlines have been pushing them to have the next generation of planes even more fuel efficient. Something like 1/3 or more of the cost of running an airline is jet fuel. And with that, there's a big, strong market force for the airlines to push Boeing and Airbus to have more fuel-efficient vehicles, airplanes. So airplanes more. So those are new technologies, improved technologies. Now that we had changed insulation, implementation of existing technologies. We didn't have to create anything new. New building insulation, both new buildings and retrofit of existing buildings, but even pool pumps. You reduce your energy use by 60 to 90% by variable speed pool pumps. You must be saying, boy, what a bunch of trivial things. They're all insignificant. And if you're saying that, you got the point. Because what energy efficiency has been is accumulation of a lot of things, each in themselves, which looks insignificant. And I'm going to give you some aggregate statistics that show how a lot of insignificant little things add up to a massive thing. So other building technologies, insulation around your water heater, weather stripple, programmable thermostats. What I thought was cute was that early programmable thermostats, you know, you can have it go down at night and stay up when you're warmer in the day, when if you're heating or if you're cooling, hot in the middle of the day when nobody's around. Well, only something like 20% of them were programmed. 80% of them might as well have been a dumb thermostat. And so anybody who remember the VCRs that always flash 12, 12, 12, same concept. So what's the simple solution? Well, they're sold pre-programmed now. You buy a thermostat, it's an Energy Star pattern that's pre-programmed. It'll get cool at night in the heating cycle and warm during the middle of the day. So if you can't figure out how to program it, you've got a nice Energy Star pattern there automatically. It's created that as the default option. And as those who have studied behavior know that the default option is very powerful. Plug strips somewhat. Whole buildings. Here we can look at the federal government and their energy intensity per square foot. This number of square foots of facilities has gone down a little bit, square feet. But look at the energy intensity. In '75, it was 200,000 BTUs per square foot. Now it's 120, down 60%. Whole buildings by the federal government. The Stanford heating cooling system, it's not an energy system. It doesn't supply any energy. It's just an energy efficient conversion system that moved us from the steam system to the hot water system, use hot water and cold water that is heated or cooled up by electricity, which we buy from off campus. But this can reduce the carbon emissions and energy use by the whole system. Let me jump in. We have changed practices. This is a long quote, but this is from DuPont Titanium Technologies, one of the DuPont companies. The headline is that they saved $100 million from energy efficiency. That's really what their headline was. They save a lot of money. I love what their general manager said. No great eureka moment. They're tracking down every possible opportunity, adds up one motor, one valve at a time, day after day. Hardware and software and control rooms to give operators more detailed energy information. New pigment products, new plants that are more energy efficiency. Lots of little things cumulatively save them $100 million. Motivation for energy efficiency. This is within Microsoft. This is a dashboard that they use to track building performance index of every one of their facilities internally, and you can track it on different time scales and find out where you have energy use problems by benchmarking one facility after another. So Microsoft and many other companies use big data to find out ways of saving money for energy efficiency. Airlines, I told you about the technology. Well, the technology has led to reductions in BTUs per seat mile, and this is for international and domestic, the change in BTUs per seat mile since 1960. And if you just compare with 1970 before the crisis, the BTUs per seat mile is cut in half, but the BTUs per passenger mile is down much more sharply. And why is that? Because the load factor has gone up much more. Airlines have learned to, using software and incentives and yield management, to crowd us into planes. Not smaller seats, because that influences BTU per seat mile, but the difference between that and passenger miles is a profit motive, private sector profit motive that the airlines have led to. If you look at thousands of BTU per passenger mile, this is 10 or 11, and that's 2.5 or 3.5. Tremendous energy efficiency in air travel. So that's why our air travel, domestic, can continue to grow while the actual amount of fuel that we use is declining in the aircraft industry. Now, another practice is some commercial buildings are being retrofit. This is the Empire State Building, and this is their internal analyses of all of the actions that they were taking in order to reduce energy efficiency, reduce energy use. Notice these small percentages, 2%, 3%, 5%, 9%, from all of the various things they did, leads to 38% reduction in electricity use from the retrofit. Now, did they do that because of regulations? Well, actually, they got some energy efficiency rebates from the utility, but they share their spreadsheets. This was profitable for them without any rebates. They took the rebates, of course, because it was gravy, but 38% reduction basically in the commercial buildings. What's interesting, if you look at how much of that is in the tenant space versus the building, these are the actions that they found that influence the base building. These are the things in the tenant space. Their own tenant energy management, windows, the daylighting. So in the retrofit practice, more is happening in the tenant space than in the base building. So what they've done is having brand new contract forms between the Empire State Building, the real estate trust, and the tenants in order to deal with the split incentive problems that you have here, then have in buildings. So they have the performance contracts, which then have been used to manage this within tenant space. This is what Tony Malkin, or the real estate trust, invested in. This is what they co-invested in with the building tenants. Energy efficiency then was not just the technologies, but legal structures were changing, and contractual structures to motivate changes. You can't read most of these, but this is internal carbon prices. This is the list of North American companies who've imposed internal carbon prices in their operations so as to motivate their managers to do things to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. But most of those emissions were energy use, so it therefore motivated reductions in energy use. So those are examples. Many more examples, but we only have so much time in the seminar. Let's look about the aggregates. So I want to look at before the energy crisis, 1973. This was fossil fuels. See that little purple? That was nuclear. Green was totally renewable energies. And renewables is a broad definition of it. It was almost entirely hydropower and burning wood. So that was the renewables there. The gray is the imports, and the blue is the total amount of energy used. Notice that the imports by 1973, at the time of the embargo, had just tripled from the year before. We were looking at it just going up and up and up, and now we've seen an oil embargo where the Arab OPEC countries embargoed the United States, Netherlands, UK, and a few others from oil. Oil price tripled at that time. It was a shot across the bow, and that changed everything. But notice this blue energy use. It was growing right along lockstep with the economy, minus about 0.5% a year. So that means the ratio of energy per GDP was declining about 0.5% a year. And so energy use was going up with the economy. So if you look at energy per unit of GDP, I could draw lines from the beginning to the end, or following most of this from 1950 through 1973. It averages about, call it 0.5% a year reduction in energy per unit of the economy. That means energy use was growing that much less rapidly than the economy. Oil prices increased sharply, and then in '85 dropped, and then in about 2004 or 5 started going up again. So energy prices, this is what got everybody's attention initially. So what would have happened if we follow that same trend? This is the actual growth of the economy, minus 0.5% a year. This was what I'm calling the benchmark of what we would have had with only limited energy efficiency, no more than we had before this shot across the bow. that's 180 quads of energy that it would have grown up to. The forecasts at that time were around here and there, so this was consistent with what everybody was forecasting who was doing the analysis. We created government agencies. The Federal Energy Administration was created, and the Project Independence Report, remember President Nixon, Project Independence, completed by President Ford. And it said, look, there's several things you can do. You can accelerate supply, more domestic production, what they call the conservation strategy, we would now call an energy efficiency strategy, emergency planning. And I like this. They said any program would be a surely mixed strategy, taking elements from, it's an all of the above strategy, first came from the Ford administration. But it wasn't just what the government did. It was the private sector now faced high energy prices. They also faced the reality that energy was an issue, so they started thinking about it. It was at the front of their minds now. So it became an important factor of innovation. You saw like the DuPont titanium technologies, what they're doing. So the patterns of innovation, now energy efficiency was an important criteria in the innovation, like the innovating for the winglets in airplanes. Capital investment changed because there was a profit payoff for reducing energy use. And even management changed. You'd hire energy efficiency coordinators or energy coordinators in the companies charged with finding ways of reducing the use of energy. So here's what the actual energy use has been in the United States, and you can compare it to what it would have been without the energy efficiency. And that difference is about 80 quadrillion BTUs, 80 quads, from 80 to a current of 100 now. And that is all of those little things that I was telling you about, all that on themselves didn't look very important. Cumulatively, it just kept growing bit by bit. Some of you are parents, and you know having children, they don't seem to grow from week to week or month to month, and all of a sudden they're asking you for college tuition, and you say, boy, they've grown. That's essentially what's been happening. It's been a slow, cumulative process. Notice that since 2000, we haven't increased the use of energy, even though the economy grew 28%. So it's not that we've decoupled from energy in the economy, because when the economy goes down, energy use goes down. It's that the rate of energy efficiency improvement now is roughly equal to the rate of economic growth in the US economy, so our energy use isn't growing. So if you look at it in terms of energy per unit of GDP, that was before the crisis. We had the 0.5% per year. Once we started getting energy policy, it went down to 2.7% a year until oil prices dropped in 1985, then dropped to 1.7% a year. What changed between these? Here you had a lot of policy initiatives, a lot of public policy attention to energy, and very high prices, all creating things that work together to cause energy efficiency cumulative in the economy. Here, those issues, it was still a higher price than we've had in the past. Still a lot of energy attention, but a lot less than we had during this other time. And still public policy, but less. And the rate of change was less. Now, some of you may say 2.7%, 1.7%, that's pretty small numbers. Yeah, they are. A couple percent a year. But energy use in 1973 was 14,000 BTUs per dollar. 2014, it was 6,000 BTUs per dollar of GDP adjusted for inflation. So the effect of these cumulative small, tiny things all that got together made the energy intensity of our economy cut down very, very sharply during that time. So you can say, okay, the federal government asked for more supply of energy and energy efficiency. Let's put that together. Here's the total supply of energy that we have. This is fossil fuels. The purple's nuclear. This is renewables. And this is still, even up here, those renewables are still over half hydropower and burning wood. And so this uptick right here is basically fracking for oil and gas. You see this increase in nuclear from nothing to up there. So this is the contribution of energy supply to bring the imports in gray down to controllable manners. That's about 24 quadrillion BTUs. The contribution of energy efficiency towards closing that gap is about 80 BTUs. This is back to what I said, that what's happened on the demand side of the market cumulatively throughout the whole economy has been much more important quantitatively than what's happened on the supply side for energy security, for reducing that gap. One thing is most of them are pretty invisible. You know, you walk past a house and there's got a solar cells on the house and you notice it. You come back and tell whoever you want to talk to, hey, the Joneses have solar. If you walk back that house, and they also have light-emitting diode lights. They have an Energy Star television, which is turned off when it's not used. They have a well-insulated home. They have an Energy Star pattern on their thermostat. You would never notice that, and you'd never tell anybody that, because that's the boring stuff of energy efficiency. But that could have been just as significant for energy as those solar panels on the roof. So mostly invisible. Furthermore, if you're measuring how much solar energy would generate, you know what number to use because you start from zero. No doubt about it. Here's how much. For energy efficiency, you don't know where to start from because it's what you didn't do. That's why I started with a benchmark of what was the pattern per unit of the economy that we would have before all of this action to start changing the patterns. Cumulative small changes. So what's the consequences for the environment and security? Well, if you look at carbon dioxide emissions, we all know COP21 is going on, Paris right now. We could ask about the carbon intensity of the economy. You could say carbon dioxide emissions per unit of GDP. You can decompose it as two multiplicative factors. Carbon dioxide per quad of energy use per unit of GDP. This is the energy intensity I've been talking about. This is the carbon intensity of energy consumption. How much, and so this is really the demand side of the market. That's the supply side of the market. When we have zero or low carbon sources of energy, that reduces the carbon intensity. That is wind, solar, hydro, nuclear power. Maybe biomass, depending upon which kind of biomass we're using. All of that would reduce decarbonize the energy sector. So so one could then decompose the decarbonization of the U.S. economy historically into these two multiplicative factors. That's what I'm going to do next. So here is the carbon, million metric tons of carbon, of carbon dioxide, excuse me, per quadrillion BTUs of energy, starting from 1950 down now. You know, it was going down before the energy crisis as we moved away from coal. We had more oil and gas and relative to coal. Actually, since that time, the decarbonization has been slower than before the energy crisis. It flattened out for a while here. Now it's gone down here. Why has it gone down here now? Mostly fracking for natural gas is what's been doing this. If you quantify the effect from this to that, the biggest single effect is we have more nuclear power. And the second biggest is more natural gas. And a factor, an order of magnitude smaller than that, factor of at least smaller than that, is wind plus solar plus geothermal. Okay? So we say, okay, let's look at that decarbonization, and let's ask how these together led to the decarbonization of the US economy. It hasn't been decarbonized nearly enough, but what has happened so far? So this red is carbon intensity of the US economy, carbon dioxide per dollar of GDP, and that's the change in carbon intensity of the economy. The blue, so you have those two factors, as I say, carbon intensity of energy and carbon dioxide and energy intensity of the economy. So that's the change in energy intensity of the economy, the blue. I've separated this as to the historical trends in energy efficiency improvements. And I don't think any policy or any change since the 1973 should take any credit for that normal economic process. And this dark blue is what I'm calling the energy efficiency, this discontinuity that happened at the time of the energy crisis. So that looks like it's taken up most of the action. There's the role of nuclear plus solar plus wind plus hydropower and making the energy system less carbon intensive, and that's that black line. So the economy now is 89%, or the energy system is 89% as carbon intense as it was in '73. The energy intensity of the economy is 45% as much. So you multiply 45% times 89%, and you get down here to the 39%. So as I said at the beginning, if you look at the numbers, the reason that we're cleaning up the carbon dioxide in the economy is a little bit because of nuclear, much less because of solar and wind, but mostly because of energy intensity of the economy and energy efficiency. I mentioned imports. If nothing had happened, no energy efficiency improvement since the shot across the bow in 1973, this gray plus this gray would have been the energy imports. Even if we increase this amount of the supply, that would have been something like 100 quads of energy import. So big it couldn't have happened. U.S. could not have politically survived in a situation that vulnerable. The world markets for energy would not have been able to provide that amount. So what would have happened is energy prices, imported oil, would it be $40 a barrel now? I don't know how much they would be, 200, 300, 400, way up there. But we would have internally have been forced to a debate of what we were going to do. We would have gone to energy efficiency and new supplies. We would reinvent project independence, and we would have, so we couldn't have gotten to this. This would have been a non-viable situation. But what kept us out of that non-viable situation is mostly energy efficiency and a little bit additional supply. So all of you who've seen the television advertisements from the American Petroleum Institute that said, we've seen the new energy power in the world, and it is the United States. And it says because of the oil and gas, the fracking for oil and gas, we now are secure. Well, that's true. That's that amount. That's the amount at which we're more secure because of the oil and gas fracking. That's the amount we're more secure because of the nuclear. And that's the amount we're more secure because of energy efficiency. So I agree with the advertisements, just not the causation that's implied in those advertisements. So I notice I'm run out of time. So that's what I expected to do. These things, if you want to follow up on it, those are in the book. The draft PDF of the book that has a lot more of the details than this is posted on the website. I ask that this be posted not just for the students, but for anybody who wants to use it. It's on there right now. Afterwards, it'll go to the archives. The title of the book is pathetic still. It's boring. It is about as boring as watching people's lights get more efficient. So good ideas are welcome for a catchy title of this book, but I expect it to come out this summer, and so here's where you get more information. Anyway, I'm going to go to Q&A now because I've basically overshot my time, so thank you.
Of your talk as being more catchy than that. Oh, okay, so as usual, we'll start with students. We can go a few minutes over because we had technical problems at the beginning. Student questions?
A great presentation there, first of all. I would be interested in checking out the global numbers in terms of energy efficiency as well, especially because I think the economy of the United States has shifted away from energy-intensive processes because things like manufacturing has moved on to China and such. So I assume a part of that curve, the drop, would also be accounted because of things like that.
Let me stop the question there because you've been posed two different questions, for both of which I have some answers. So let's look at sectoral, okay? This is the industrial sector. This was the past trend, 73, it flattened out. That's what you're saying. It's a lot of substitution. Notice that same inflection was in the transportation, residential, and the commercial sectors. So this change happens everywhere, not just in the industrial sector. So in the industrial sector, you could ask what happened. Well, one, is it that the industry collapsed? You say, no, this is the index of industrial production. It's just kept growing up until about little after, around the year 2000, just before flattened out part of the recession and China competition. But it's not that industrial production stopped. You can ask, well, how much of this is substitution between changing what the U.S. produced versus more efficient production of the same sorts of things? And this is a EIA, Energy Information Administration, EERE analysis of the effects of the structural shifts and what the intensity shifts without the structural shifts, adding together to this change in industrial energy intensity. They said this change in the industrial sector is about half and half. About half structural shifts and half of these energy efficiency within those. Now, in the sector. My definition of reducing energy efficiency in an economically attractive way still includes this shift. So I count this all as energy efficiency, but that cuts in half. That's half and half in the industrial sector. So if you take the industrial sector, what it would have been without these changes versus what it actually was, and you do the same for all of the other sectors, you'll see that you have about here about 35 quads reduction in all of the other sectors that had nothing to do with international competition. About 45 quads in industrial energy efficiency with those structural shifts. About half of them was the structural shifts, half wasn't. So you still have, even if you want to think about that, is mostly energy efficiency. And then let me just go quickly to a couple other graphs here. Where we look at carbon dioxide trends of a bunch of other countries. They've been going down. China is way up, and it's been going down, and it's been going down on others. The green is the United States. So we see the carbon dioxide trends going down. You ask, energy intensity trends, well, here's US has been going down sharper than others. Most of the others, the trends have been going down somewhat. And then carbon dioxide intensity of energy going down for all countries except for France. It's been basically flat. So France is because of the nuclear programs, they've been much less carbon intense. But for the rest of the world, again, what's been happening is it's mostly energy efficiency has been the changes and not much decarbonization. So if that's goes to
so
what
that
you
was
asked.
A great question on history. I think I'd like to actually preempt all additional questions because we're running out of time and ask one more. And that is, Jim, based on what you've learned and what you've presented, could you play it forward for us? If you were in Paris right now and not in Palo Alto, what advice would you give the delegates? Not in terms of specific policies, but where to focus their attentions.
I would say that the all of the above strategy is still appropriate, but most of the bang for buck that they're going to be able to get is in the way they manage their economy for energy efficiency, the way they promote the innovation in their economy, the way they influence the fuel efficiency of their vehicles. Yes, they should be investing in the new renewables. But the reality is if they really focus on their economy and how it uses energy, they can keep the consumption of energy in check while the new supplies of energy catch up and be able to move forward. And so that commitment to the demand side is really something that I think is really important for them to do. Now, I have to note that in President Obama, in the State of the Union Address 2013, gave a speech in which he talked about all of the energy things that we should do and that how successful it is. And he mentions wind and solar and geothermal and all the supply side. And then way down in the report, he said, oh yeah, we have more fuel efficient cars. He didn't notice that all of the action so far has been on the demand side, but he did set a goal of doubling the productivity of energy by 2030. And maybe if I want to go back to one quick table here. He set a goal, which is, said this is the US goal, we will double energy productivity. Now, what's energy productivity? It's just the mathematical inverse of energy efficiency. It has nothing to do with productivity particularly, it's just the inverse of it. But people like things that sound like you're getting bigger rather than getting smaller. So it's going to double it. That would mean the annual intensity decrease rate of energy efficiency would have to be 3.4% a year, average from 2010 to 2030. Actual from 2010 to 2014 is 1.8%. So that means from now till 2030, when somebody else is president, It will have to be a decline rate of 3.8% per year to meet the goal he set. Actual during his administration has been 1.5% per year reduction. And the most we've had is a sustained rate of change was immediately after the crisis, with a lot of energy policy and a lot of attention, and high oil prices was 2.7% per year. So I guess the other bit of advice I would say to everybody out there, come on, when you're making commitments, let's make honest commitments.
Great.
Okay.
On that note, Jim, thanks for giving such an exciting talk about such a boring subject.